Ray Delaney cut the padlock off the Alder Creek post office on a raw Tuesday morning in March of 2022, and the shackle cracked like a rifle shot and dropped into the dead weeds, 70 years after the last postmistress snapped it shut and walked away for good. Across the road, 2 pickup trucks sat idling with their headlights on in the grey, nobody getting out. Because that is how Alder Creek, Missouri attends its own history, from a distance with the heater running. Ray believed he had bought a building at a county tax sale. He had not. He had bought an accusation that had outlived every person who made it, a Christmas that nobody ever took down, and a rack of letters that would, before spring was out, make 91-year-old Harold Ferris stand up in a crowded cafe, take his hat off his head, and unsay the worst thing his family ever said about anybody. He put his shoulder against a door that had swelled into its frame through 70 summers, and when it finally gave, the air that rolled out was 1951. Dust, dried ink, floor oil, and underneath all of that, something faint and sweet that he would not be able to name until, days later, he found the tin of horehound candy in the 3rd drawer of the sorting case. But that morning, Ray knew none of it. That morning, there was only the cold, the dark lobby, and 112 small brass doors catching his flashlight all at once. To understand what Ray walked into, you have to know what he walked in from. He was 66 that spring, 3 years retired from carrying mail out of Trenton, 11 miles east. 31 years on Route 2, 104 miles of gravel a day, 6 days a week, every box from the river bottoms to the county line, through ice storms that bent the fence wire and Augusts that softened the tar on his dashboard. A man learns a country that way, mailbox by mailbox, and he learns its people by what they send and what they wait for. Ray had watched widows wait on pension checks and boys wait on draft notices, and he once watched an old man wait 11 years for a letter from a brother in Spokane that finally came. So when the Trenton paper printed the county delinquent tax list in July of 2021, and halfway down the column, Ray read parcel number 411, Alder Creek, 1 brick commercial building, condition unknown, he set his coffee down and read it twice. He knew that building. Everybody who ever drove the old river road knew it. A squat, handsome brick box with a flagpole rusted the colour of chewing tobacco and a padlock the size of a hymnal on the door. Locked, the story went, since Harry Truman sat in the White House and never once opened since. Ray drove out and walked the foundation twice, found the brick sound and the roofline straight, and told his wife Junie he meant to bid. Junie, who had been married to him for 41 years and knew that arguing with a Delaney was slow work, said only that a man who spent 31 years hauling mail had no business buying the 1 post office in the county that quit. On the courthouse steps that August there were exactly 2 bidders. The other was Verl Cutts, who runs the salvage yard south of Trenton and made no secret of what he was after. The wall of lockboxes he figured still stood inside, 100-odd doors of solid brass, worth decent money by the pound, melted down. Ray went to $3,100, which was $300 more than Verl would go, and signed the papers with the same pen he had signed his retirement with. The county clerk handed him the deed and told him the last recorded owner was Nola Hartwick, deceased 1981, and after her an estate out in Oregon that had not answered a letter in 40 years. Then the clerk leaned over the counter, lowered her voice, and asked if he knew what Nola Hartwick had done. Ray said he had heard pieces of it. The clerk said, "Well, you will hear the rest before your truck leaves the square." He heard the rest at Deb Sully's cafe, which sits where the Alder Creek School used to, and feeds what remains of the town, about 140 people and twice that many opinions. Harold Ferris held the corner booth, the way he had every morning for decades. 91 years old, retired from the seed corn business, sharp as a tack and proud of it. And Harold told it as it had always been told. In December of 1951, the week before Christmas, money went missing out of that post office. Not pocket change. $318, the money orders for the whole month, and the stamp drawer besides. Money the farm families of that town had scraped together to send away in a year when hogs were down and half the county was paying its doctor bills in instalments. Nola Hartwick, the postmistress, claimed a registered mail pouch had gone missing between her counter and the railhead. The pouch was never found. A postal inspector rode up from Kansas City in January, sat in that office 3 days going through her books, and when he left, Nola paid the department back every cent out of her own passbook, gave up the office she had run for 18 years. And the mail moved to Trenton, and the flag came down. And that, Harold said, tapping the table, was the confession, plain as print. You do not pay back what you never took. Harold's own father had been one of the men hired to load the sorting tables and the mail crates onto a truck that February, and standing on the step within her hearing, his father had said to the driver, "Count the bags twice." Harold was 20 years old that winter, and he had laughed, because his father laughed, and because at 20 a man laughs when his father does. Nola Hartwick padlocked the building she and her late husband owned outright, and she lived another 29 years on the edge of town, keeping a garden, selling eggs, sitting in the back pew of the Methodist church every Sunday of her life. Reverend Ott never would take her name off the flower rotation, and people noticed that, some approving, some not. She never defended herself, not once, not to anyone, and she died in 1981 and was buried beside her husband under a stone that says only Hartwick. Deb Salee, refilling Ray's cup, added the one strange thread the town had never known where to sew. Her own mother swore that one night in June of 1966, coming home late from a church supper in Trenton, she saw a lamp burning in the post office window. Near midnight, a steady light, then gone. 14 years after the place was sealed, nobody ever believed her, and Deb said her mother held to it on her Bible to her dying day. Ray drank his coffee and thought about the padlock, which belonged to him now, and said nothing yet. Inside that first week, Ray mostly stood still and looked. The lobby was oak wainscot to the waist and plaster above, and the wall of boxes ran floor to counter height. 112 doors in 8 rows, each with its beveled glass window and its little combination dial, and not one pane cracked. On the bulletin board, a rate card offering first-class postage at 3 cents. A poster, gone the brown of weak tea, that said mail early for Christmas. Paper chains, cut and pasted by schoolchildren dead of old age by now, still looped over the counter grill, and on the counter itself a foot-high tinsel tree, the tinsel gone to wire. The calendar on the wall said February 1952, and in the square for the 14th, in a small, upright hand, one line. Final dispatch, 7:05 in the morning. She had worked the Christmas rush under those paper chains, with the whole town talking behind its hands, and she had not taken them down. And then she had locked the door on Christmas and all. The craft of the place was the first thing that did not match the story. Ray had stood in 40 post offices in his working life and never seen fixtures like these. The sorting case behind the counter was quarter-sawn oak, pigeonholes labelled in neat painted script with the family names and the route numbers of a town that no longer existed, and every joint of it was dovetailed. No nails, no screws, drawers that slid after 70 years like they were oiled last week. Behind the wall of boxes ran a service corridor 18 inches wide, so the boxes could be filled from the back, without a soul, in the lobby, seeing anything but brass, and the corridor door closed on a spring latch a burglar would need a week to find. Under the counterlip, burned into the oak with a finishing iron, E. Hartwick, 1934. Emmett Hartwick. Carpenter. Nola's husband, who had built the fixtures the year she was appointed, who had put a tin roof on the building in 1945 and run the gutters into a stone drain so the foundation never took a drop of water, which is the whole quiet reason the place survived, and who died of pneumonia in 1947 without ever knowing what the town would one day say about his wife. The building had been built dry, built square, built by a man who expected it to matter for 100 years. Fools and thieves, Ray thought, do not build like that. The second layer was the personal things, and they came slowly, drawer by drawer. Her cancelling stamp, the wooden handle worn pale where her thumb had ridden it for 18 years. Her copy of the postal manual with a grosgrain ribbon marking the chapter on a postmaster's personal liability for shortages, a chapter she had plainly read many times before it ever came for her. A photograph, dated on the back December 1941, of 7 people in winter coats lined up at the counter, with parcels for boys just gone to the service, everyone trying to smile. And then the rack. On the back wall of the sorting room stood a wooden rack Emmett had clearly made to match the rest, and painted on its header, General Delivery, Hold. In it, bundled in twine by year, stood 26 letters. Ray put on his reading glasses. Every one of them was marked postage due, and on every one, tucked under the twine, a penny or 2-cent stamp had been added and cancelled. She had paid the postage on every single letter out of her own pocket. Letters for families who could not spare a nickel that year or had moved off before the mail caught up to them, and when the department closed her office and the rules said send the strays to the dead letter office in St. Louis, she had broken the only rule of her life and kept them. Because in St. Louis they would be burned, and somebody, someday, might come. In the flat centre drawer of the sorting case lay her dispatch book, the carbon record of every registered dispatch that ever left that office, and Ray turned to December 18th, 1951, with his heart going quicker than he cared to admit. There it was, registered pouch number 8812, dispatched at 6:50 in the morning. Contents, money order remittance and postal funds, $318. And the line where the carrier signs to take custody, the one line in 18 years of pages that is blank. Beside the book, a bank passbook from the Farmers Bank of Trenton. Balance in December 1951, $402.10, the saving of a widow's lifetime. One withdrawal, January 11th, 1952, $318, paid to the Post Office Department. Balance remaining, $84.10. She had bought back her honesty at the price of everything she had, and the town had read the receipt as a confession. And against the back wall of the sorting room, under a grey canvas cover, stood a black iron safe, 19 aughts vintage, waist-high, with a painted rose fading on its door. Ray tried the handle. Locked, he spun the dial and it turned loose and easy and told him nothing. Whatever Nola Hartwick had wanted kept, she had kept it in there, and there was no combination written in the dispatch book or the manual or anywhere else a week of careful looking could find. It was Junie, in the end, who found the letter. She had taken a soft cloth to the boxes, working row by row of an evening, and in the slot behind the counter marked General Delivery, a slot Ray had glanced past a dozen times because it sat in shadow. There stood a single envelope, upright, waiting, the paper gone cream at the edges. On its face, in that same small, upright hand, it said, "To the one who opens this office." Junie carried it out to the step where the light was, and they sat down side by side on cold concrete, and Ray opened it with his pocket knife. Gently, the flap giving up its old glue with a sigh of dust. It was dated June 9th, 1966. Deb Sally's mother had not lied about the lamp. If you have ridden this far down the river road with Ray, do one small thing for us and subscribe to the channel. Because what this letter says, and what it unlocked, is the reason this story exists at all, and you will want to be here for the rest of it, and for the roads we walk after this one. Whoever you are, the letter began, if you are reading this, then the boxes are open again, and I am past caring who knows what, which will be a novelty. My name is Nola Hartwick. I kept this office from 1934 to 1952, and I need to set down an account, because keeping accounts is what I was good at. Whatever they told you at the cafe, she wrote plainly, no self-pity in it anywhere. She set down the morning of December 18th, 1951. An ice storm through the night before, the roads glazed, the wires down toward the river. Dale Prine, who carried the mail by contract between Alder Creek and the railhead at Trenton, running 40 minutes late with chains on his tires and the northbound train not waiting. She had the registered pouch sealed and ready, the lead seal crimped, the Christmas money orders of the whole town inside. The rule said the carrier signs the book before the pouch leaves the counter. Dale had his gloves on and the truck running. I had known Dale Prine since he rode his father's hay wagon, she wrote. I handed him the pouch and told him to sign Thursday. That was my whole mistake, and it was made out of trust, and I have never learned how to be sorry for trusting people, which may be why God in his mercy never gave me children to ruin. The pouch never reached the railhead. Dale swore to the inspector he had never taken custody of any registered mail that morning, and his receipt book agreed with him, because nothing was in it. Her dispatch book said the pouch existed, and her hand said it left, but no signature said he took it, and the difference between those two things was $318 and a woman's whole name. The inspector was not cruel, she wrote. He was a man doing sums, and the sums came out against me, and the manual says the postmaster stands the loss. I paid it and I resigned before they could dress it up as anything gentler. I want it written somewhere that I understood exactly what I was doing. It is a strange comfort to be ruined correctly by the book. But it was the next page that stopped Ray's breath, because the next page was June of 1966. 2 weeks after Dale Prine died, she wrote, his son Weldon knocked at my kitchen door with his hat in his hands and a King Edward cigar box under his arm, and he could not say one word, so I made him sit, and I made coffee, and then he said it. On his last night, Dale had told him where to look. Inside the barn wall, behind the harness pegs, wrapped in an oilcloth. Weldon had gone out with a lantern before his father was cold and found it, and now he set it on my kitchen table. The pouch, she wrote. Number 8812. The lead seal still crimped, unbroken, 15 years in a wall. He never even opened it. That was the part that finished me. Reading it on that step, and it was the part that finished her too, she said, though not in the direction the town might guess. Dale Prine had a daughter in the polio ward in Columbia that winter, and hog prices on the floor, and doctors sending bills with red stamps on them, and on an iced-over morning with $318 in his truck that nobody had signed for, a good man had a bad hour. And by night, he could not do it, could not open it, could not spend it, could not bring it back and say what he had almost done. So it went into the wall, and he sold his second truck to pay Columbia, and he carried that pouch 15 years without ever touching it, and it took the last 2 weeks of his life to say its number out loud. He asked me, by way of his boy, to forgive him, she wrote. I had done it already, years before he asked. Forgiving him was easy. Watching him at church trying to catch my eye and always missing, that was the hard part. Ray read on. She had a choice to make in June of 1966, and she set out her reasoning like columns in a book. Inez Prine, Dale's widow, was living then, with 3 grandchildren in the school at Trenton. To clear my name, I would have had to hang his on the square, she wrote, and his people were not the ones who whispered about me. The whisperers had gotten 15 years of enjoyment out of me already. I decided they could wait for the rest. People said I lost my good name. I never lost it. I always knew right where I left it. So on a June night, she had walked into town with a lamp and her old keys, and she had put the pouch and the cigar box and Weldon's letter into the safe her husband had bought her, and she had written this letter and stood it in the general delivery slot, and she had turned the combination and gone home in the dark past Deb Sully's mother on the road. The combination, her letter said at the bottom, like a hand held out across 56 years, is Emmett's birthday. 11-8-98. Left, right, left and lift the handle while you turn the last number, it sticks. He always meant to fix it. Ray knelt at that safe the next morning, with Junie holding the letter and Deb Sully and her husband standing witness, because Ray had decided the town owed Nola witnesses, and he turned 11 and 8 and 98 and lifted the handle while he turned, and the door of the safe swung open like it had been waiting with its breath held. Inside, a canvas-registered mail pouch, stenciled 8812, its lead seal crimped and whole. A King Edward cigar box holding a note in a shaky pencil hand. I am sorry, it is all there. D.P. and folded around it, Weldon Prine's letter to Nola from 1966, with a return address in Wichita. And beneath those, a slim black book Ray had not seen the like of, hand-ruled, labelled in her script postage book. 17 years of entries. Keller, postage due, 12 cents, paid, Tate, money order to the hospital at Columbia, $4, sent, do not collect. Denison, box rent, waived, crop held out. Line after line after line, 17 years of a town's hard winters carried in nickels and dimes by the woman it would decide to call a thief. And on the last page, totaled in her hand, $187.40. There was no note under the total. She did not explain it, and she did not excuse it, and she plainly never showed it to a living soul. Ray sat back on his heels on that floor for a long time. Then he did the thing 31 years of carrying other people's most important days had taught him to do. He got the record straight before he said one word. He drove to Trenton and put the dispatch book and the letter in front of Kayla Dunn, the young postmaster there, and Kayla, who had heard the Nola story her whole life the town's way, went quiet reading and then got on the phone to the district office and stayed on it most of a week. The inspection service file from 1952 still existed on microfilm. Shortage repaid in full. Resignation accepted. Case closed, no finding. And the missing item, listed in the inspector's own typed hand, registered pouch number 8812. The numbers matched across all those years like a key going home in a lock. On the second Friday of April, Deb Sully closed the cafe at 6 and set up 60 folding chairs, and it was not enough chairs. The Historical Society came, all 9 members, and then the town came, and then people whose grandparents had left Alder Creek in the 50s drove in from 3 counties, because word travels the river road faster now than it did in 1952, but it travels the same route. Carol Ackers came up from Wichita, Weldon Prine's daughter, 60 years old, found by Ray through the return address her father had written on an envelope before she was born. Ray stood up front in his good jacket with his reading glasses, and he read Nola's letter out loud. All of it. Slowly. And the only sound under his voice was the coffee maker and somebody's oxygen machine, and when he got to the line about knowing right where she left her good name, an old farmer in the second row put his hand over his mouth and kept it there. Then Ray held up the pouch, and Kayla Dunn in her uniform confirmed for the record what it was and what the file said, and with the county clerk photographing it for the record, Ray broke a lead seal that had held since December 18th, 1951. Inside, banded in paper gone the colour of a fawn, the money orders of Christmas 1951 and $318, every bill accounted for, money from dead hands, meant for dead hands, and not $1 of it ever spent. And then Harold Ferris stood up. It took him a while, and nobody hurried him. He took his hat off his head and held it to his chest, and he said, "I was 20 years old on that step, when my father said count the bags twice, and I laughed." She had handed me my draft notice through that window that same winter and told me she would pray me home, and I went, and I came home, and I never once in 70 years spoke up for her. He looked around the room. "We did not take her name with evidence," he said. "We took it with a laugh here and a look there, so there was never anything a body could stand up and argue against. I am 91 years old, and I am asking Nola Hartwick's pardon out loud, in front of witnesses, because in front of witnesses is where we took it from her." He sat down. Carol Ackers stood next, and her voice shook and held. "Your town called her a thief for 15 years while she was protecting my family," she said. "My father drove to her door sick with dread in 1966, and she made him coffee, and she told him a boy is not his father's worst hour. He kept that from me until I was grown. She protected people who never asked her to, and most of them never knew. I do not know what you call that where you live. Where I live, they put it in stained glass." And then, from the back, Verl Cutts, the salvage man, raised his hand and said if it was all the same to Ray, he would come polish those 112 doors himself, no charge, seeing as he had tried to buy them for melt, and the room laughed the kind of laugh a room needs after crying, and that was the vote, and everybody in it knew it. Dale Prine has been gone since 1966, 2 weeks after he finally said the number out loud, and he lies 40 feet from the woman who forgave him, and the town has talked it over and decided to leave that exactly as it lies. Harold's father died in 1969, believing what he believed. His son spent one April evening unsaying it, which is more than most sentences ever get. The $318 went, per the instruction in her letter, where it would do some child good, to the school library in Trenton, and the small plaque over the new shelf says, "From the Christmas money, 1951. The money orders went into a glass case. And Ray Delaney put his old satchel over his shoulder one more time that spring and delivered the 26 letters, one by one, on foot where he could, his last route, unpaid and unhurried. Maxine Keller, 88, received a letter mailed to her mother in 1951 from a sister who had gone out to Bakersfield with a recipe for lemon cake folded inside, and she baked that cake for the Historical Society the following Sunday and stood by the pan while people ate it, not saying much. A wedding invitation for a June 1952 wedding, never claimed because the bank took the family's lease that spring, went to the couple's daughter in Chillicothe, who has it framed now beside her parents' anniversary portrait. The invitation nobody came to answer, and the marriage that happened anyway. And one letter, addressed to a boy who left for Korea that winter and did not come home to claim it, was read into the record at the museum, per Nola's instruction that what cannot be delivered should at least be heard, so that somebody knows it was written. By fall, the lobby was a museum, open Saturdays, free, and Ray and Junie live in the back rooms where the sorting cot used to stand, which suits two people who have spent their lives close to the mail. Val came 3 weekends running, and the wall of boxes shines like 1934. The flag goes up every morning and comes down at dusk, by the manual, though Ray does not need the manual to know it. On the wall where the wanted posters used to hang there is a brass plaque, and it says, Nola Hartwick, postmistress, 1934 to 1952. She kept every account, and box 13, which was her own box all those years, stands open with her cancelling stamp resting inside, and it is not for rent, not ever, and every child who comes through on a Saturday asks about it, which means the story now has more keepers than the Whisper ever had. If this one stayed with you tonight, if you knew a Nola in your town, somebody who carried a blame that was never theirs and carried it without bitterness, tell us about them in the comments, because we read every one and those names deserve saying somewhere. And answer us this plain, the question this whole road comes down to. If it had been you in that February of 1952, would you have cleared your own name and let a struggling family go down with the proof? Or would you have carried the Whisper for 15 years so a widow and her grandchildren never had to hear it? Tell us which one you would have done and which one you hope you would have done, and be honest about the difference, because they are not always the same answer. Next Sunday, we follow a surveyor's letter up a ridge on the Montana line to a fire watch tower that kept its logbooks locked for 60 years, and a watchman the county called a liar until the mountain itself took his side. And if these back roads are your roads, tell us where you are watching from tonight, and whether your town still has its old post office, and what became of it. The last light in Alder Creek this evening is the lamp in the post office window. The flagpole stands bare for the night. 112 brass doors hold their shine in the dark, and box 13 stands open, its beveled glass catching the lamp, and the whole room smells faintly, even now, of horehound candy.